The new day was no different from all the previous ones. Students were gathering for lectures. There were somehow few people today. Gayun was already sitting at the table, in her favorite place. Suddenly, someone slammed a tin can onto the desk. These were again offers of feelings from the annoying Sticky. The girl's face did not express a single emotion. This was already getting pretty boring. She closed the textbook and put it on the desk. She hastened to remind her suitor that she had a boyfriend, and such gestures were very inappropriate. Sonbi laughed. He said that he knew it, and for some reason, suddenly imagined that he himself was it. The girl exhaled. She was tired. She continued to look at the guy coldly. This was not courtship. This was already mockery of her nerves. Other students were watching all of this, and they were actively whispering, discussing what they had just seen. Sunbei's behavior was disgusting. People saw and discussed this. After all, the girl had already made it clear that she was not alone. Although few believed it, no one had ever seen her with a guy. Gayun heard all this behind her back. She became nervous. It was unpleasant. The textbook quickly flew into the bag. Unable to bear it, the student stood up abruptly and walked along the aisle between the tables to the exit. Prilipala did not calm down and rushed after her, endlessly calling her name. She ignored him, tired of proving. Sunbei suggested having lunch together. She refused. She had already had lunch. It didn't matter that it was only morning, how he was boring her. The guy continued to follow. An offer to go to the cinema followed. It was not clear whether he was laughing or serious. The girl was trying to figure out how to untie him. She has night blindness. She can't watch movies in the dark, she blurted out. She finally reached the auditorium exit. Without listening to his latest advances, she jumped out and slammed the door behind her, right in his face. She stood by the door. She exhaled tiredly. I wonder how much longer she would have to endure this. It was already unbearable. She couldn't take a single step. Shireen walked around the campus. Young people were walking around, sitting on benches, relaxing. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of his name. Two girls on a bench were discussing rumors about him. They said he was gay. For them, the rumors were true. And the relationship that was turns out to be fake, and it's no wonder that it didn't last long. We ended with the fact that he has a lousy character. This is immediately obvious to everyone. Surprising. The guy clearly heard that his character was like trash. From the first days, one of the girls noticed it. His patience ran out, and he quietly and stealthily approached them from behind. They did not hear, and they shuddered a little when they heard the voice. So he's trash? Asked Chirim. He was shaking with anger. He had never thought before that people thought of him like that. The girls got scared, jumped up, and ran away. They said at the end that they had told the truth. Then there was no point in running away. A friend came up to the guy. He grabbed him by the shoulder. Wherever they went, Chirim was the center of attention. They discussed it everywhere. Chirim himself didn't want this. How they turned against him. He sighed with concern. Clutching his face, he whispered that maybe he should take a leave of absence. He was so tired of everyone's stares. And all because one day the roommate announced to everyone that he liked guys, surprising the whole group of friends. At the same time, for some reason, he blamed Chirim. Apparently, he attracted him with something, but he himself did not want it. Why it happened, and how he couldn't understand. He lived as usual. He didn't do anything unusual. And suddenly, everyone decided that he was like that too. And no matter how hard the guy tried to prove that he was not like that, it didn't help. Sitting down on the bench, his friend remarked, perhaps Chirim should pay more attention to girls, start dating. Then the rumors will die down. But this wasn't in the guy's plans. It's hard to date, lots of problems. Maybe he's not even cut out for it. The friend looked at him in surprise. He couldn't believe that he was serious. After all, relationships aren't just problems. Chirim suddenly asked if he knew someone who supposedly wanted to date. But the girl didn't want a guy. The guys decided to leave this conversation. Better to go to a cafe to relax. Otherwise, these are completely stupid thoughts. Gayun and other classmates also went out to sit in a cafe. But it probably wasn't the best idea. That clingy one had gotten to her again. He had declared in front of everyone that she should choose the drinking game. She tried to keep quiet. His friend tried to stop her. After all, no one plays this game. But it was useless. Hagin couldn't stand it any longer and decided to leave. Such gatherings were just a test of her nerves, a mockery. She stood up. Her friend tried to stop her. After all, they were having fun. She took her arm and asked her to stay. She didn't want Gayun to leave her alone. The others weren't that close to her. And the girl looked at her friend with a pleading look. The friend wanted to stay a little longer in that cafe. She had her own interests. And she pointed to him at the table, hinting, there was a nice young man sitting there. And the girl had her own plans for him. She obviously liked him. Gayun understood everything, and she made concessions to her friend. She decided to stay a little longer. And then she heard that she was her best friend. The bully didn't let her sit quietly again. He saw that she was trying to leave, and now he was egging her on for that too. The friend saw the girl's upset look. Maybe she should have pretended to be dating someone, and he would have left her alone. Gayun thought about it, but she didn't know who to ask. She didn't even have any male friends. Then the friend suggested transferring the aggression to the guy. We need to tell him what a bastard he is, so that everyone around knows it, since he doesn't understand refusal. Gayun was tired of this too, of all the gossip about her. More than anything, she wanted it to end soon. Suddenly, the music started playing. The girl felt something was wrong. Something was happening again, something she clearly didn't want. Looking back, she saw a pester walking through the hall with a cake in his hands. And he was singing, or rather, it sounded like he was howling words of love in her direction. Everyone looked at this picture with their mouths open. He continued to howl how he would love her forever, carrying a cake with a lit candle. He fell on one knee in front of her, holding out the cake. And in front of everyone, he declared that he was sure that their desires were mutual. And in front of everyone, he invited her on a date. The bully waited for Gayun's answer. Having called her a queen, he apparently expected greater favor. But she only looked at him with a frightened look, clearly not happy about such events. Everyone at the table even interrupted their conversation. And not only at the table, in the cafe too, waiting to see how events would unfold further. The girl just wanted to apologize, to refuse in a quiet, calm voice. She felt awkward, but she was interrupted by a request not to make her wait. And suddenly this impudent fellow, without even waiting for her answer, went to kiss her. This was beyond her patience. Gayun grabbed the first thing that came to hand. It was a bottle cap. She got really angry. She shoved the cork into the boor's mouth with all her might. She had had enough. How fed up she was with his behavior. Zadira clearly did not expect such a turn of events. Apparently, he was very confident in his irresistibility. He could not understand why she did this. Gayun couldn't stand it and yelled at him. You can't be so selfish. After all, he didn't arouse her sympathy. He only made her feel awkward. And suddenly, he said that she was trying to make him jealous. She made up a non-existent guy for him. He either didn't understand or was pretending. He was sure that she did it on purpose, but to make him jealous. Or she really did have a boyfriend. If so, the bully promised to apologize for his behavior. But there was a condition. Gayun had to show it. Otherwise, he didn't believe it. It had nothing to do with it, the girl screamed. It was all incredibly unpleasant for her. Her patience was simply running out each time. Here, her friend couldn't stand it any longer and jumped up. She screamed at the whole room that Gayun had a boyfriend. Even she couldn't stand it. The girl looked at her friend questioningly. She couldn't understand why she did it. And what would happen next? Sylvia said that she would say so, since her friend couldn't make up her mind. And pointing her finger at the hall, she said that he had been sitting in the cafe all this time. Everyone looked at the guy at the next table. He was the one who was pointed at. And he himself looked questioningly. His friends were whispering that they were pointing at him, calling him the girl's boyfriend. He saw it himself, but he didn't understand what was happening. Everyone started whispering. The guy was recognized as Chirim from the film studies department. No one could believe that the guys were dating. The guys looked at each other, not understanding what to do next. The guy whispered his help to her. She was confused. Chirim's friend looked at him, not understanding what he was going to do now and why. He just smiled mysteriously. The bully, sitting on the floor, turned sharply to Gayun. He screamed, not understanding and not believing. She could not date this cute guy. Turning away from him abruptly, she declared that he could believe whatever he wanted. She didn't care. Taking her bag, she wanted to leave. She was not obliged to talk about her personal life. The main thing was that she refused him. And he did not understand. Putting her bag on her shoulder, she said sharply and categorically, "She will not go on a date with this bore." And she left. The guys in the cafe couldn't understand what had just happened. Were these two really dating? Or maybe it wasn't. The bully couldn't calm down. It couldn't be true. It wasn't. He continued to be indignant and prove that they weren't dating. Suddenly, someone called out to him, saying hello. The guys at the next table were sitting with questioning looks, and next to him stood that very cute guy. And he introduced himself as Gayun's boyfriend. It was unexpected. Celia ran after her friend. She ran and shouted after her for Gayun to wait for her a little. She asked her to stop. Having caught up with her friend, she stood in front of her with her arms outstretched. She did not let her pass. The girl apologized. She clearly did not want this to happen. Gayun asked to get out of the way. She had neither the strength nor the desire to figure it out. Her friend claimed that she just wanted to help. She stopped, turned to her friend. It became interesting what result she expected. What should happen in the end, she thought, because now it can get even worse. One day everyone will know the truth, and there will be even more talk and rumors. Celia was upset. She really wanted to do the best. She was ashamed. It had all happened impulsively. She started crying. Gayun didn't want her friend to be so upset. She calmed down and asked her not to cry. Everything would be fine. After all, in essence, nothing could be changed. There was no point in being offended by my friend any longer. The friend even squealed with happiness. She was so glad that the person close to her was no longer angry with her. The only thing Gayun asked was to never do that again. Not to set her up again, and not to decide what concerns her. She exhaled. She had no desire to go back to that cafe anymore. So she decided that it would be better to go to the library to see her friend tomorrow. But then Celia stopped her. She was interested in whether it was true that her friend didn't have a relationship with that guy. Maybe she didn't know something. Gayun was surprised why her friend was asking her so much. It turns out that after she left, he himself said that he was her boyfriend. Sitting in the library, the girl could not understand why this happened. She sat and thought and could not concentrate. After all, he doesn't even know her. She couldn't understand why he said that. The girl sat lost in her thoughts. For a moment, she thought she had said it out loud, and she was scared. She instantly turned around to see if anyone had heard her. There was no one else. Having woken up, she decided to put these thoughts aside and continue working. She was typing very quickly. All that was heard was just clicking. Suddenly, she was torn away from her work by footsteps nearby. That same guy came up to her and asked if he could sit down next to her. She was speechless from surprise. She couldn't say anything, so the guy decided and answered for her. Kareem asked if she remembered him. She shook her head in fear, as if she didn't. But she remembered perfectly well. He asked again. Gayun looked thoughtful. Suddenly, he pointed at the monitor screen and laughed. At the end of the sentence, she typed was his name. Apparently, she typed it in her thoughts by accident. Frightened by her exposure, the girl abruptly closed the laptop. Kareem found this funny. He looked at her and introduced himself. It was Lee Cherim. He looked at her attentively, with kindness and tenderness. Her gaze was not reciprocated. She only asked what he really wanted from her. Something seemed suspicious to her here. He pointed to the sign that said there should be silence in the library, and he suggested that they talk outside. On the street, Gayun couldn't calm down and just walked back and forth. She didn't like this whole situation, and it made her wary. The guy decided to start the conversation first. He said that in the cafe, he finally said that he was her boyfriend, and he suggested or offered to try. Gayun did not understand what he meant now, and she clarified it with him. It's simple, he suggested starting dating. Or rather, he suggested pretending to everyone that they were dating. Gayun asked again if she understood correctly. He suggested that they pretend to everyone that they were dating. But she didn't understand why the guy would do that. Well, she needs help to get rid of that annoying guy, so he wants to offer it. It's all pretty simple. However, she was haunted by the question of why Cherim needed this. Strangely, the guy shuddered at such a question. And what's even more surprising is that he decided to avoid answering. He simply stated that he shouldn't tell her that. Hearing such an impudent answer, Gayun abruptly turned to leave. Then she declared that the deal was off, since that was what he thought. Charim called out to her. He had to stop her. He made up his mind. He also wanted the rumors about him to dissipate a little, and she could help him with that. The guy admitted that for some reason, people think he is gay. That's why he also needs a girlfriend to dispel these myths. Now he told everything and sincerely asked for help. He would like to go somewhere together. That's what he asked for. Sitting in class, Gayan recalled these words. She was somewhere in the clouds and was not present at all in the lesson. The friend noticed this and tried to bring her back to normal. And even better, go buy something to drink so that Gayan would come to her senses. The girls ran to the vending machine. They looked at everything that was available, and they couldn't decide what they wanted. Suddenly, a familiar but very unpleasant voice called from behind Gayan. It was that annoying guy again. No peace for a moment. He asked her if she was sad to buy drinks for herself. After all, he doesn't buy them for her anymore. He wanted to hurt the girl with a stupid question. It was a very stupid question because she had never asked him to buy her anything, and she had never taken anything from him. It turns out it was her eyes that were doing it, and she didn't even know it. Turning away from him, she declared that she would now wear sunglasses so that he wouldn't see her eyes anymore. He laughed at her statements. The guy said that he couldn't have misunderstood her. And anyway, she shouldn't run after guys like Charim. And suddenly, he decided to remind about what happened 3 years ago. And even if people don't talk about it anymore, it doesn't mean they don't remember. And anyway, she should be glad that at least someone still likes her after all. He was a cruel and immoral guy. Gayun turned back to the machine. She tried not to listen to him, and especially not to answer. The best solution would be to simply ignore this bore. Suddenly, a hand appeared from behind, and a gentle voice said that it would be better for her to drink something warm. This was no longer the same Pester. Gayun was surprised. No one expected to see him here. The Pester stood with his mouth open. No one could say a word. The girl thanked him and took the drink. This was her chance to get rid of Banuk once and for all. Suddenly, she realized that now she had to play to the end. Unexpectedly for Charim himself, she pressed herself against his chest. With the most tender look she could give him, she looked into his eyes. And then she asked if it was really his new perfume that was emitting such a scent. Charim understood her idea and picked it up. Naturally, it was a new perfume. After all, she said that such a scent would suit him, so he bought it. He took her hand gently. She didn't pull away, but on the contrary, she reciprocated. And she said that she was very pleased. He was also glad to hear it, and so they continued to stand there looking at each other. But whether this look was at the audience or already sincere remains a mystery. Everyone around started whispering. No one could ask directly. But what they saw was news and an unexpected turn of events. Only Banuk could not calm down. He began to tremble with anger, and he shouted, asking if everyone really believed that these two were dating. Then he turned to the couple and started yelling at Gayun that he knew something about her boyfriend. His friends told him, and she should know about it, but she didn't care. Banuk started to claim that it was all just a show to make him jealous, as if his personality was of concern to anyone. Charim looked completely calm, but he couldn't help but react. He leaned over to Gayun and gently grabbed her hair, pressed it to his face, and whispered that the one who pestered her was an idiot if she thought this was a performance. Banuk couldn't calm down. He continued to rage and scream, and he claimed that he was sure and knew for sure that Charim was gay. A friend's hand grabbed his shoulder. The guy advised him to stop. After all, he was only putting himself in an awkward position. The situation suddenly turned against him. Suddenly, everyone started whispering not about the couple, but about how he was a bastard and didn't understand hints, that it was time for him to calm down. If this is really a sham, then the couple deserves an Oscar. Gayun held her fake boyfriend's hand even tighter. Let them think so. Banuk started screaming that she would definitely regret choosing this loser, as he said. But she didn't think so. Charim suggested leaving there and not hearing this hysteria anymore. The girl agreed. She was getting more and more tired of it. The pest decided to show pride and declared that he would be the first to leave, and he would no longer watch her turn her back on him. A strange act. And he left. The girl couldn't believe that everything had turned out this way. He had finally left. She even asked again, because she wasn't imagining it. She was ready to be in a fictitious relationship, just to get rid of this annoying guy forever. Sitting in the park, the guys discussed what happened. Chirim was impressed by how well they played. The girl was incredibly grateful to him. He smiled sweetly. Gayun even asked if he always smiled like that. No, he replied, only depending on the reason. The girl couldn't understand him. Maybe he should find a girlfriend. Surely many people like him. But Chirim was against it. Relationships, in his understanding, are a lot of trouble, a lot of responsibility and worry. She completely agreed with him. It was better to find a job and earn money, not to waste time on quarrels and showdowns in relationships. They were perfect for each other, Chirim concluded. This made them both happy. It was a chance to solve the problems they had and reduce the talk and rumors. At least until they develop feelings for each other, they can continue to play this game of fake relationships, and they came to an agreement. He needed to get rid of the rumors about him. Gayun needed to get rid of the clingy one. They decided to try. Gayun desperately wanted Byung-guk to disappear from her life, to leave her alone. That was her greatest wish at the moment. Chirim promised that she shouldn't worry about it anymore. They shook hands, sealing the deal. They would try to do everything in their power. They wrote down the numbers they took from each other and signed them by name. That's how it should be, and it won't arouse suspicion. The next day, Gayun was walking through the cafeteria at lunch with a friend. She heard whispers behind her. Everyone was discussing that she was Chirim's girlfriend. Celia looked at her friend and asked if everything was okay. Yes, everything was fine. She was ready for this turn of events. The friend still couldn't understand what was going on. After all, Gayun said that she and that guy weren't acquainted. And then that evening, she dumped her and went with that guy. She just wanted to explain to her friend how someone took the tray from her hands, thus interrupting the conversation. Chirim suddenly appeared again, saying that it was very hard for her, and in general, he missed her very much. Asked if she had slept well, Celia looked at the couple and asked in surprise if they were really dating. The guys confirmed it. Let everyone think so. Gayun was a little upset. She still wanted to tell her friend first, but things turned out a little differently. But that's how it is. It's better for them to sit down somewhere. The guys sat down to have lunch together. Chirim suggested drinking some water. Perhaps they should have all talked calmly together. Celia was surprised when they managed to get so close. And anyway, the guy is a year younger than her friend. How did that happen? And I was very surprised by the answer. It was the friend who told Chirim not to pay attention to the age difference. Meanwhile, Gayun whispered a few words in her ear. Namely, that she would definitely tell her everything in private later. And she waited for the details. Realizing that she was most likely the odd one out at this table, Celia slowly left, having come up with a pretext for some planned meeting. And she left, waving cheerfully at the guys. Now she was calm for her friend. For some reason, she was sure that this guy would protect her. They were left alone. Gayun opened her bag and tried to get something out of it. She wanted to give something to the guy, and if possible, then right now. He agreed. Of course, she could give it to him, but he didn't know what was in it. She handed him a piece of paper and put it on the table in front of him. Chirim bent down to read, and was, to put it mildly, surprised. There were 100 questions. It was as if he was undergoing a detailed questionnaire. Even though they weren't actually dating, it really wouldn't hurt to get to know each other better. There was some truth to that. She had already answered and printed out her part. He was very taken aback. She hadn't thought that she would offer so much effort to this venture. Nevertheless, it made a lot easier, and he understood it. So he sincerely praised her for it and promised to answer everything. After that, Gayun immediately got ready to leave. After all, they still had to go to class. In a completely unexpected turn of events, she met her pseudo-boyfriend at the doors of the auditorium. He asked her why she wasn't coming in, and he went in himself. Why he was there too, she didn't understand. He hadn't attended these classes before. She had never seen him there. She stood by the door and thought, but couldn't collect her thoughts. When she entered, Chirim was already sitting at one of the desks. She came up and sat down next to him. He continued to twirl his pen and play with it. Gayun asked why she hadn't seen him in this classroom before. Classes are held here every week. It turns out he hadn't attended. The girl was outraged that he had not attended classes since the beginning of the semester. and he calmly replied that attendance was not really taken into account during this period. Gayun began to explain what he might have missed. During this period, the professors talked about the curriculum. Charim egged her on, that it turns out she's an excellent student. In principle, what else can you expect from the girl sitting in front? He should have understood that right away. The girl was outraged by his irresponsibility. She asked him to go to the back row right now. He could get into trouble there. The guys in the back row suddenly thought he was pointing at them, although that wasn't the case, and they started whispering. Charim understood their thoughts and suggested that they play a show for them now. For example, she could hold his hand. This would cause more talk. But the girl said that she was thinking about studying here. Now she has to prepare for class. Now it is clear why she is the leader of her faculty. Suddenly, he said he didn't know her zodiac sign. Now he does. And her favorite food is seafood and salmon sushi. He didn't know that either. The girl said she couldn't believe it because he remembered it all, even the shoe size. He studied the questionnaire. Gayun was impressed. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't thought he'd take it so seriously. At best, he'd skim through it. It turns out there is a garlic flower, and it is her favorite flower. Cherit. Ma'am read it out loud. Apparently, she is an unusual girl. She explained to him that garlic actually belongs to the lily family, and it is essentially a flower. Few people delved into this. Garlic blooms with small purple flowers, but since people are not used to it, they do not perceive it as a flower, and they are afraid that it will stink. Perhaps Gayun went too far at this point. But the guy listened to her very attentively, and it seemed he was even serious and understood everything. He ruffled her hair. The girl was surprised how easy physical intimacy was for him, unlike her. And she stopped. Touching would be enough for today. Charim laughed. After all, they had agreed to act like a couple. Couples have physical touching even in public. The statement was appropriate. Suddenly, he decided he wanted to call her Garlic. Such a cute nickname. She was outraged, because it sounded like a wife. So be it, laughed Charim. In a relationship, everything should be absurd and funny. To him, it all seemed sweet and wonderful. Gayun called him a cocky jerk. It seemed like he was laughing at her. He knew he was one. Suddenly, a guy was running towards them from the very door. He was calling Charim by name. And for some reason, he was indignant that someone hadn't told him about the new girl. But somehow he didn't notice the girl next to him. But when he saw her, he slowed down. And stuttering, he greeted her. After classes, they sat in a group at a bar. They were Charim's friends, one of whom had managed to get drunk, for which he felt rather embarrassed. It was not under such circumstances that he wanted to introduce her to his friends. She convinced him that the guy was not essentially to blame. He could not be responsible for his friends. The friends' behavior was quite noisy and boisterous. Gayun was surprised. 3 friends and completely different. Charim decided to order soup and salad with salmon, which surprised the guys. And the girl, too. Although she understood that this was a sign of attention for her, one of the friends clearly had too much to drink. He attacked the guy with his fists. He was outraged that his friend had a fake relationship and he didn't tell anyone. Another woman's name flashed in the conversation. They said that she would be outraged by all this, although she probably already knows, like everyone else at the university. Charim didn't really want to see her and asked her not to invite him. Considering all the accompanying factors, he understood that it wouldn't end well. Gayun didn't understand anything. Suddenly, the door opened and someone came in. A bottle was placed on the table with a bang. Did they really decide to leave someone overboard? A female voice said nearby. Gayun turned around. Behind her stood a blonde girl. Her hair was cut into a bob. In a black leather jacket, very pretty indeed. The blonde stood in front of the guys, crossing her arms and clearly showing her displeasure. The guys fell silent. They didn't know what to say to her now. Gayun understood. Apparently, they all knew each other. Moreover, the girl shamelessly moved her chair and sat down at the same table with them, without even asking if it was possible. Charim asked how she got here. They rudely cut him off that he was on a bus. Then the girl did not let him say a word. She turned to face Gain. So this is what Charima's new girl is like. It surprised her. Either she knew for sure, or she just assumed. Gayun whispered and asked who it was. They told her it was Shin Nara, A friend. A girl from their group. Although she was very strange. Out of nowhere, she started screaming that Sharim had promised her not to meet with anyone else. Completely unclear claims. One of her friends explained to her that the relationship was fictitious. This made her even more angry. After all, she could have played this role herself. All he had to do was tell her. Sharim grimaced. There was no way he wanted her in this role. Just the thought of holding her hand and pretending to be a couple disgusted him. The blonde looked at the guy with bitterness from his words. She poured the alcohol into the glass in one motion and drank it down in one gulp. Gayun silently watched this from the side. The guys tried to stop her, afraid that she might overdo it, but she put the glass down and it seemed to calm her down. She felt better. The girl turned to Gayun again and addressed her. What prompted her to play a couple? What was the benefit in it? She was very interested. They refused to explain. One of the friends also asked himself this question. Why did she suddenly choose Sharim? Why this game? And they looked at him and her intently. Gayun gathered her courage. She drank a glass of something strong and said the first thing that came to mind. Namely, that he was hot. This surprised Sharim himself. The whole company turned around and looked at her in surprise at these words. The guy laughed at that. He egged him on that he didn't know his wife liked hot guys. It was funny. The blonde rolled her eyes at these words. She exhaled and jokingly asked to shoot her, just so she wouldn't have to hear such a thing. Sharim looked at her reaction and said that it was no wonder she was lonely, and if she was sick of it, then maybe she was jealous. Gayun watched from the side and came to a conclusion. This girl clearly liked her boyfriend, but she shouldn't care about that right now. Suddenly, the guy snatched the glass from Gayun and drank it himself. She was surprised by what he did, and he only replied that she had enough, because she said she couldn't drink much. But she didn't say that. At first, she couldn't understand where he got it from, the questionnaire. The guy reminded her that he had read it and remembered everything. Gayun wanted to give the glass back. She tried to snatch it from his hands, and he asked to let him continue playing her caring boyfriend. The blonde stood up abruptly and declared that she was bored. She was sick of all this and disgusted, and anyway, she knew how it would end soon. Sharim would probably start whining soon about how painful this relationship was. She didn't want to be around anymore. She decided to leave. She called one of the guys. She didn't want to leave alone. At first, he didn't understand why he had to get up right now and why him. The second guy volunteered to go with her himself. In the end, everyone decided to go. Suddenly, this blonde was planning something bad. In the end, the couple was left alone. Sharim felt uncomfortable. The evening had been noisy. He hadn't thought it would be like this with friends. Gayun said that it was time for her to go too. She still had a task to do today. She was responsible. Sharim thought she was offended by him. He didn't want to upset her. It touched him very much. He was worried. The girl wasn't angry with him. There was no point. After all, he really wasn't to blame. Sharim replied that it was good. When she started to get up, he suddenly grabbed her by the shirt, trying to stop her, and suddenly asked if he could call her later, to which he received consent. After that, he smiled sweetly. He was pleased. Everything was fine. And they left this establishment. Sharim crawled out to class in the morning, although he felt absolutely awful. A terrible hangover tormented him after yesterday. He pulled his hood up. It felt easier that way. And besides, he was tormented by the thought that Gayun was upset because of his friend. The guy really wanted to talk to her, or write a message right away. But suddenly, he saw her walking ahead and called out. He quietly followed her into the library and didn't interfere with her work. He just sat there fidgeting in his chair silently, waiting for the moment to talk. The girl finished and closed the laptop. She turned to Sharim. He wanted to talk to her about something, and now she was ready to listen. She told him again what she was waiting for. He wanted to talk. Now he was just silent. He was obviously nervous. It was unclear why. Suddenly, he was overcome with panic. He was afraid not of the reaction. He was afraid of starting a conversation, and he didn't know where to start it. Tired of waiting, she said that it probably didn't matter. In his eyes, it looked like she was furious, and he should confess all his sins right now. Sharim pulled himself together, tuned himself in, and started explaining that yesterday's girl was his friend. They had known each other for a long time and were studying in the same specialty. Usually, they didn't interfere in each other's personal lives. Now she was clearly upset that she didn't know about their pseudo-relationship. That's why she was behaving like this. Gayun extended her hand forward, indicating that he should shut up. She couldn't understand why he was telling this now. He was explaining himself. Their relationship wasn't real. The guy looked at her in disbelief. Did she really not care? And he was so afraid that she was angry with him. She answered coldly. She had no reason or right to be angry with him. She asked to continue working. She was working on her laptop, and Shireen never left. He sat next to her, looked at her, and smiled sweetly. In her mind, she thought that she really wanted to ask why he hadn't called. But she decided that it was better to just not think about it, to forget about it. The girl decided that he had nothing more to say, so he could essentially be free. Chareem decided to wait. He wanted to have lunch with her. Gayun warned that she needed a lot of time to get to work. The guy stayed anyway, and waited for her for an hour. He practically fell asleep sitting at the table. He sat silently, trying not to disturb her. But then he wrote a note for her to see. He was very sleepy and asked her to give him some time now. Suddenly, he asked how it happened that he hadn't seen her at the university before, although he already knew many of them. But he didn't notice. It turns out that during his first year of studies, she took a vacation. When she returned, he had gone to serve in the army. They missed each other. But how did Gayun know about the army? The questionnaire. She remembered it too. He was the first of his friends to sign up for the service because he lost a bet. That's what he wrote in the questionnaire. Charima was interested, so she had studied the questionnaire too. She now knew his height, favorite food, hobby, and best friend. He was pleased. He also wanted to share his knowledge and show what he had learned. And she asked him to tell her what he remembered. He knew a lot too. Little things she didn't expect. How she sleeps, what is light and when, what is on time. This is the reason why the guy didn't call her in the evening. He really didn't want to wake her up. And he sincerely apologizes for this. It so happened that his friends contacted him then. And as a result, he returned home after 1 o'clock in the morning. Calling her at that time would not have been good, to ruin her entire dream. Without asking the question, Gayun still received an answer. And it satisfied her. Carelessly tucking her hair behind her ear, she smiled. Shireen wondered why she had skipped the last questions of the questionnaire. They were about her last relationship and her ex-boyfriend. The girl probably didn't want to talk about her ex-boyfriend. Suddenly, Gon became sad. It wasn't like that. There was some other reason. It was somehow unfair, because he answered all the questions, and she avoided the answers. He was also interested in who her ex was. Gayun became even sadder. Suddenly, memories of terrible heartache came flooding back, and big tears. A few years ago, when she was even younger, she sat right on the floor and cried bitterly. The emotions came flooding back with renewed vigor. She wasn't ready to discuss all of this yet. The wounds weren't healed yet. The girl asked to just try to move on. It was obvious how much Gayun was worried and how uncomfortable it was. The guy noticed it. Even her ears turned a little red, and he realized that he had started this conversation in vain. He immediately decided to apologize. Apparently, he had crossed the line a little. Shireen asked for forgiveness. Suddenly, the girl stood up and wanted to go first. She wanted to be alone. She asked to have lunch together another time. Gain jumped up abruptly, closed the laptop, and ran away. Even though he asked her to wait, she didn't hear him anymore. And the young man still didn't understand what happened to her. She flew out of the building. She hid around the corner so that people around her would see her less, and she quietly slid down the wall onto her haunches. So she sat there hugging her knees. It seemed to hurt less that way. She lowered her head and thought about when the time would come that she would be able to cope with this. The next day, Gayun and her friend were sitting in a cafe. She told everything about this fake relationship, which shocked her friend. Selgi was surprised. After all, his friend already knew his friends, and this hardly resembled a fake relationship. The girlfriend wasn't very happy about all this. She didn't approve. She hadn't heard very good things about Chareem. He was hot-tempered and rude, and also a gambler. Gayun sat quietly. She suspected that her ex-girlfriends might have said this. She didn't care. Selgi didn't know who said it, so all the more so, it's nothing more than stupid rumors. The friend was worried that something bad would happen to Gayun again, but she saw that she was already on this guy's side. The girl only wanted the best for Gayun. She made sure that she was more attentive and not trusting. The friend thanked her reservedly. At the same time, she assured him that she had everything under control, especially since they weren't even dating. Just for now, Celia noted. Suddenly her phone rang. She picked it up. The girl simply beamed as she spoke. Gayun looked at her phone. It was silent. She was sad, and no one called her. The guys also gathered in the cafe. Two of them were clearly not in the humor. They had a gloomy look. They were picking at their plates, not really eating anything. Their friend couldn't understand and demanded an explanation of what had happened. Charim raised his head and asked gloomily, how would his friend feel about starting a relationship with someone with a troubled past? He didn't understand what he was talking about. But the guy was talking about his girlfriend. But the friend again didn't understand who he was talking about, because in fact, the girlfriend didn't really exist. Charim said that she attacked him because he brought up an issue from the past, which is completely out of character for her. And in general, she looked very sad. You could see how much it hurt her. She looked like a wounded cat. The friend asked what they were talking about then. After all, this state was apparently the reason for the conversation, but it remained a secret. Charim doesn't like drama in relationships, so he got the usual advice. He can break up with her if something is bothering him. It was another person's turn to share his experiences, and he fell in love once again. The two decided to drink some water. Their throats were dry, and there was more news and suffering ahead. They still had to get to know their chosen one. It turns out he fell in love with Celia. He managed it. The guys sighed. No one believed in the seriousness of these feelings. He proved that he was in love at first sight with this bright blonde. And in fact, it is very serious, and she is the only one. He began to cry and beg his friends to help him. But they did not understand how they could do this. And then he told his idea. He wanted to work with everyone in the team with Gayun. After all, her friend is there. Charim was moving along the university corridor. His phone began beeping frantically with messages. It was his friend. He wrote out a whole plan for the team's work and the roles of each of them. Everything seemed perfect. But he didn't take into account that Gayun was angry with her pseudo-boyfriend, and that means it's not easy to come to an agreement. Charim sat and looked at his phone. He scratched his head and thought, what should he do next? He didn't want to be in a fight. Another ding interrupted his thoughts. He thought it was Nayeon again, with her plan. This time it was Gon. She asked if he was at the university. For her, he was free, which he quickly wrote and rushed off. And then he began to doubt whether he seemed too intrusive and open. And he glanced at his phone, waiting for an answer. He was prompt. She invited him for coffee. The girl wanted to talk about something. Charim didn't like coffee, but it wasn't about coffee. He wanted to meet her, and he could drink something else. So he hurried to the meeting. They met in a cafe. Coca-Cola was a good drink. He was glad to see her. Gayun decided to apologize for being too sensitive. Then, in the last conversation, she was not offended. He claimed that it was his own fault. However, it bothered her greatly. Maj said she was so upset. She shouldn't have been, because in reality, it was all in the past. He still believed that he was wrong. It was he who made her feel sad, and to remember everything again. She was pleased by his support. She smiled. The guy was on her side. Andy cared, worried. Charim thought that now was the time to help his friend. Andy directly offered to work together on the project. He studies at the film studies department, and she probably needs a film crew for a theater project. It's high time they work together. Gayun suddenly felt sad. She wasn't sure if Seolgi would want to work together. After all, she didn't approve of his company, so Gain herself is not against it. The girl confirmed there was something else left to do, to convince her friend. Charim decided to take it upon himself. He asked when Seolgi's classes would end. He wanted to meet her and talk. After class, he stood in the hallway and waited for Seolgi. Everyone around noticed the new guy and discussed where he came from, especially the girls. He wasn't sure about anything yet, but he promised to bring Seolgi anyway. His friend joked that they could play drinking with the girls, but Charim thought it was inappropriate. He had other methods. He thought it was perversion, although he understood that his friend was joking. The class had just ended, and Seolgi came out of the classroom. She saw her friend and called out to him. This guy came to pick up the girl, wanted to introduce her to his friend. But she was clearly not thrilled with the idea, and she didn't have time for that, although she didn't want to seem stupid in front of this guy. He grabbed her hand and started pulling her along without listening. He shouted that she had to go, and he ignored her request. Tareem realized that he had better intervene now. He called the girl, and with that, he stopped them. Suddenly, he asked her if she could lend him some money. She hadn't expected it and was very surprised. The guy was surprised too. Tareem laughed as if nothing had happened and asked directly that he needed to borrow $200. The guy wanted to take the girl away from that rude guy, and he decided to just say that he needed to talk to her for a few minutes alone. That guy decided to leave, casually telling Solji to catch up when he sorted it out, and finished the conversation. She looked at Tareem with anger and bewilderment. Apparently, she liked that guy, and she didn't need recommendations not to communicate with him now. She was angry and didn't want to hear anything bad about him, especially from a person who didn't really know him. Tareem knew he was right, because this attitude towards her was clearly inappropriate. He did not respect her. He argued that she should have noticed it. He tried to talk to Seulgi, to convince her that she shouldn't bend over backwards for all the seniors. They don't respect her. She didn't want to listen. She asked again if he really needed money. Jerem answered that he just wanted to make a good impression on her, because she was trying to convince her friend to break up with him. He was right. Seulgi thought she was too good for him, and in an even louder voice she began to shout that her friend deserved a real one. A good guy and a real relationship. Tareem turned around and decided to go. There was no point in arguing. In the end, he only said that he would suck up another time. Today, the plan did not work. He didn't want to play these games. He just waved his hand and left. He was smiling. There would still be time, he knew that. Solji was just furious with his behavior. The guy was too self-confident for her, but unusual. During the lesson in the auditorium, the friends were sitting next to each other. Selgi put her head on the table and thought about something of her own. Gain wondered if something had happened. No, it seemed like nothing had happened. She stood up. She wanted to talk. The girl asked what Cherim was like. Something was clearly bothering her. His behavior had definitely caught her attention. Gaeun thought about it. She fell silent, but she looked up from her book. She wasn't sure yet, but now he seemed like a good guy to her. The girl scrolled through his behavior in her memory and summed it up. He smiles a lot and is always honest in his feelings. Gaeun understood what was going on. Apparently, he had come to see his girlfriend. It turned out that was the case. Seulgi was surprised that she knew about it. The girl said she had a premonition. He had just said before that he wanted to work with them on a project. She understood that her friend could refuse and had the right to do so. But things didn't work out that way. Seulgi wanted to work with him. She tied her hair in a ponytail, and in a very sweet voice said that she would like to meet Cherim, to be calm for her friend. The company all gathered together, and Selgi announced her decision. The boy, who was in love with her, was overjoyed. Cherim scratched his head. It would be interesting if his friend behaved like this for the entire project. The girls thought it was funny. Selgi clarified Cherim's opinion about them working together. He said that he was happy to work with his girlfriend. Suddenly, their ranks were replenished. More of Cherim's friends came, and naturally, there was their girlfriend, a bright and noisy girl. Seulgi immediately noticed her and asked who she was. Gaeun said that she was the one she had told her friend about before. The girls looked at each other, and it seemed they didn't like each other. Seulgi thought that the girl was too self-confident. All the guys sat down at one table. They introduced themselves one by one and tried to discuss the main points of the project. After all the planning, the team decided to take a break. Work takes a lot of energy, and they were thirsty. The admirer jumped up to Seulgi and offered her something to drink. He wanted to please her and was therefore happy to fulfill her wish. Gaeun was focused and serious as usual. She wrote down and took notes on all the moments of the meeting. Everyone left, and only she continued to sit at the table, completely focused on her work, not noticing anything around her. Cherim was sitting next to her and didn't want to distract her. He also noticed her moment of concentration. He stood up, telling her he needed to make a call. She accepted his information. She didn't ask any questions. He noticed that her cup was empty and immediately offered to bring her something else to drink. She refused. He didn't understand why. He asked her not to refuse out of habit, not to be so self-sufficient in front of him. Moreover, the meeting may drag on, and she may want to drink. He would like to help and make her feel good. She relaxed a little and said that she would agree if he brought some water. That would suit her. The girl sitting next to her noticed that Tareem was a very attentive guy. Sometimes it seemed that he understood her better than her mother. The girlfriend said that he always notices if she is tired or hungry. Gayoon silently heard these statements. The girl said that she asked him not to behave like that with everyone, as if he was leading them by the nose. She continued the story about some girls, whom Tareem supposedly rejected after they fell in love with him. She hinted at Gayoon, too. She also asked her not to make the same mistake, to which she responded. She was told that there would be no fight over the guy. Her speeches would simply fall on deaf ears. There was no point in trying. Gayoon advised her to stop. Otherwise, she would simply disgrace herself. After all, she understood perfectly well what it was because of. This infuriated her friend. She did not expect such a reaction and such calmness to her attacks. She even gnashed her teeth and jumped up from her chair, colliding with one of the guys. He asked her to calm down. Gayoon continued to sit calmly. She knew how to deal with conflicts, but she didn't know how to react to this situation. Tareem sat at lectures with friends the next morning. They listened about neorealism in cinema, about the origins, essence, meaning. He glanced at his phone and couldn't help but feel nervous. No one had written or answered him. He hadn't expected this for a long time. The guy asked MG why the girl wasn't answering him, to which he heard that apparently she was simply busy. She'll answer later. On the other hand, another friend asked MG if he was handsome. After all, his grandmother told him so, to which he received the answer that it wouldn't hurt for her to have her eyesight checked. Suddenly, the phone rang. Tareem couldn't stand it. He told the guys he was leaving. He stood up in the middle of the lesson and left. Finally, he goaded his friend. Apparently, God is left-handed, so he made his friend ugly. Friends love to tease each other like that. Pleased with himself, he left his surprised friends at the lesson. They watched him with their mouths open, not understanding what was going on, and where the guy ran to, no one knew. Although they had previously shared plans with each other, Tareem sat contentedly at the table. There was a pretty girl next to him. True, she was busy as usual. She was all focused on her work. The glasses suited her, and her serious appearance did not spoil her beauty. He called out and asked why the girl had agreed to this date. Just because the guy said that was what needed to be done. She knew that this first date was just the two of them, but she didn't look up from her laptop. Tareem asked her to look at him. After all, it was a date. He was here too, and he would like some attention. The guy noticed Gayoon's casual clothes, and those glasses. Apparently, she wasn't used to dressing up for dates, or she didn't see him as a guy. She doesn't have very good eyesight, he noted, but he hadn't noticed her wearing glasses before. Apparently, she wears lenses, Gayoon confirmed. Tareem extended his hand and asked for her glasses for a few minutes. The girl did not understand why and was very surprised by the request. The guy wanted to surprise. He thought that by focusing the light through a lens, he could set the leaves on fire. But the girl ruined his plans. She said in a calm, indifferent tone that it was not a magnifying glass. Tareem didn't let up. He asked to just give him a chance to try, and he reached out to take them off. She recoiled in fear, but nevertheless, she allowed him to take off her glasses. She was very surprised by his behavior, but Tareem finally distracted her from her work. They looked at each other, and he told her that she was very beautiful. Suddenly, and fortunately for Gayoon herself, the phone rang. Since she did not understand how to act further, Selgi called. The professor wanted to talk and treat all the members of their team, and he was expecting them for 7 hours to do so. That's what she wanted to tell. She'll call the others herself. She only asked to tell Tareem. Gayoon was confused by what was happening now on a fake date, and she thought that she probably shouldn't see him more often. The girl thought he had other plans for her, and she should think about what to do next. Thinking about all this and being confused, Gayoon didn't even notice that she had been talking on speakerphone the whole time. There was no need to tell Tareem. He heard everything anyway, and he showed how she spoke. He pointed to the phone. Tareem had always known her as attentive, serious, and focused. For the first time, he noticed her clumsiness, and the guy thought it was incredibly cute. This fact made him smile. He waved to her and slowly walked away. Gayun was left standing alone with the phone in her hands, still not fully understanding what had just happened. She even slapped herself on the cheeks. She needed to come to her senses and collect her thoughts, become herself. Chirim walked away along the road, humming a melody. At the same time, it flashed through his mind that this girl was so cute. And then he caught himself thinking about it. And then I thought that he was talking nonsense. He was acting like a moron. He needed to pull himself together, and in general, get back to his tasks. Sitting at the next table with the professor in the cafe, they realized that they were not alone in this meeting. Another team was already in full swing communicating with the teacher. Selgi noticed this and asked if perhaps they should talk to him too. After all, that was what they were called for. Gayun turned towards the table where the professor was sitting. He was chatting pleasantly with other students. How quickly they make friends, the girl thought to herself. Chirim was sitting next to her. He looked at her and seemed to read her thoughts. He smiled. He began to recognize this girl little by little. Sulji was saying something, but no one was listening to her. She couldn't stand it any longer and called out to her friend. Apparently, she was deep in her thoughts. Gayun only paid attention to her when her friend poked her with her finger. She said that they should go talk to the professor too. Gayun looked towards the teacher again. She was genuinely afraid. She didn't know how to start conversations so easily. The guy who was in love with Seolgi jumped up and offered to go talk. He wanted to impress her too. His friends looked at him skeptically. No one understood what he wanted to do and how he would attract attention to himself if only he didn't make a scene. He grabbed his bottle of booze, winked at the boys, told them to trust him, and rushed off to the professor. Seolgi looked at this guy and expressed herself that he was a real shameless person. The guys laughed. The professor asked him to be honest. He asked if Lo was the life of the party. The young man denied it and declared that he was his sweet little pie. He pointed to his rosy cheeks. The guy made a face at his friends. He was waiting for their participation. After all, there was a wonderful chance here and now. Seolgi was the first to react. She raised her hand and cheerfully declared that she was a sweet pie. Chirim joined in next. He called himself a sugar pie. It was cute in the professor's eyes. The boys continued to imagine themselves as pies. The next boy called himself Blueberry. The professor laughed and asked Gayun. The girl looked surprised. Everyone was looking at her. She didn't know what to say. She had no idea. Gayun felt confused. Later, she timidly introduced herself as a first-year student. The boys said goodbye to the professor. The man waved and smiled in response. Soon the guys began to disperse. They were singing songs. Chirim was sitting on the table with a phone in his hands. His friend leaned tiredly on his shoulder. There were songs at the table too. The classmates made a cheerful toast. Only Gayun felt like a stranger here. She was superfluous in the company. The young man saw his girlfriend drinking alcohol in one gulp. He said that she should have slowed down, and he grabbed the bottle before the girl could touch it. She assured me that she wasn't drunk enough yet, and she was fine. She assured me that she could control herself better than she let on. Anne drank 3 bottles of soju. Seolgi asked her friend to give her something to drink. She might feel uncomfortable that she put herself in an awkward position. Gayun grabbed her head. She was forced to think about that again. And again she reached for the bottle. She tipped the contents of the glass into herself. She wanted to forget about what happened. Chirim assured her that there was no need to be so upset. Seolgi supported that it was even funny and cute. There were only 3 people left at the table from the company. Gain stood up to say goodbye. She had a lecture tomorrow morning. She had to go. She said goodbye until tomorrow. Chirim asked to wait. The girl jumped out, closing the door sharply behind her. But it was a toilet. The guy couldn't believe that she was drunk from only 3 bottles. Gayun walked with long strides through the dark streets. The dim light of the street lamps barely illuminated the road. Soon Chirim caught up with her. She said that she could go home herself, and she was angry that he continued to follow her. The guy said that Gayun walked in a zigzag, but she voiced a denial. The girl closed her mouth. It seemed that she was going to vomit. She sat down. Chirim was nearby. He supported and calmed her down. The guy held out the thing, demonstrating it. Said he bought it for her. Direct look. Their eyes met. Gayun buried her face in her knees. She asked why she couldn't be cheerful. The interlocutor assured her that she was a lot of fun, but it was a lie. She knew she was boring. The girl wanted to get close to people around her easily. She wanted to be as sociable as Chirim. Surprise in the guy's eyes. It turned out that he was given a compliment, but Gayun assured that she was simply jealous. The guy found her cute. He watched her sad pose. He wanted to touch her shoulder, but he didn't dare. He took his hand away. He pulled himself back. What was he thinking about? Chirim stood up and called to go further. It was possible to freeze to death if you fall asleep here. The girl was upset that he was already leaving. Gain pulled the guy by the sleeve of his jacket, asked him not to leave, but to stay with her, surprised. He asked again. She said that he should come to her house. Gayun thought it was right. The friend listened silently. The student did not let go of the guy's hand. She held on to Chirim's fingers. She wanted him to study with her. The young man found it hard to breathe. The guy allowed himself to think something indecent. He cut off the dirty thoughts. He helped the girl up. His own thoughts were no longer important. It was necessary to move on. He put his girlfriend on her feet. The young man turned away from his girlfriend and suggested that they go already. He did not understand Gayun's behavior. He did not want to aggravate the problem. Suddenly, he felt someone pull at his sleeve. Chirim glanced sideways. His companion was hugging him from behind. She asked him to stay with her. The girl looked scared. She pressed herself against her friend's back. She admitted that she was scared. There was a girl standing in the stairwell. She was trying to call someone on the phone. There was silence in the apartment. The stranger held the device to her ear. No one answered her. She took off her shoes on the threshold of the dwelling. The girl thought that the owner of the apartment had not changed her code. The brunette with a stylish haircut continued to try to call. There was no answer. Gayun came to her senses with a start. She was in bed. Her hair was scattered across the pillow. A sharp sigh was heard. The girl was brought out of her stupor by the sound of the telephone. The device was lying nearby on the bedside table. The girl reached for the phone. She needed to turn off the alarm. She remembered the dream. It was the same dream again. Gayun's finger met someone else's hand. He turned off the alarm on his smartphone. Chirim stood in front of the girl. He was glad that she had woken up. In his hand, the friend held kitchen utensils. The brunette sat up abruptly in bed. She didn't understand what the young man was doing there. He was laughing. He was also wondering why he was there. The girl did not raise her eyes to her friend. She asked if her friend had managed to find the code to her lock. The young man smiled. Who did his girlfriend take him for? Maybe for some robber. Chirim admitted that she opened the door herself. The girl exhaled joyfully. She thanked God for it. The guy asked if she really didn't remember anything. It turned out that she didn't. The friend was shocked. She really needed to stop drinking. He insistently asked his friend to do so. The interlocutor did not understand what he was talking about and why he was talking like that. There was confusion in his eyes. Chirim sat down on the chair. He put his hands on the armrests. He advised his friend to have breakfast first. The girl gasped at the unexpected offer. Breakfast was already served on the table. Everything looked quite nice. Gayun sat at the table. Her face showed confusion. She put down her spoon with a bang. She was eager to know what she had done. The guy put on a whole show. He pretended to be a girl. He folded his hands in prayer and asked his girlfriend not to leave. The couple sat across the table from each other. The brunette couldn't believe it. She accused her friend of lying, but he said it was true. Chirim suggested that his friend think carefully about what had happened. The girl tried to strain her memory. She exhaled sharply. Memories of the previous night came flooding back. The student remembered everything. How she pulled his hand. How she pressed herself against the guy. A moment arose in my memory when the girl was already in bed, holding Chirim's hand. Asking him not to leave, she demanded a promise that he would not leave. The girl was shocked by these memories. The guy looked at her and smiled. He had to apologize. Gayun admitted that she was sorry. She promised to make amends to him. The young man smiled back. He agreed with her. He said that it would happen today. She would be able to make amends to him. The girl expressed bewilderment. She did not expect that retribution would come so quickly. The auditorium was filled with students. Everyone was busy with their own questions. The girls were sitting at the study table. The friend realized that she seemed to have drunk too much the night before. She admitted that she had passed out. The blonde put her head down on the desk. She was suffering from a severe hangover. She said that she remembered how Nayeon caught a taxi. Suljia mispronounced her boyfriend's name. The brunette corrected her. A friend asked if Sharim had safely taken the brunette home. The interlocutor gasped. She hesitated with an answer, but confirmed. The blonde raised her head. She noticed that the guy took good care of her friend. He was so attentive. The friend was worried that Gaeun could fall head over heels in love with him. She specified that even she would change her mind if someone with such a face whispered sweet nothings into her ear. The brunette sat silently next to her. Sylgia continued. She assumed that it was all a pretense. The interlocutor called her friend by name. The brunette was very serious. She asked if her friend knew what happened to her when she got drunk. She didn't look at Sylgia. The blonde answered negatively. Her mouth dropped open in surprise. She admitted that her friend didn't allow herself to drink that often. Gaeun was desperate. She must have been out of her mind last night. A heavy sigh escaped the student's chest. The blonde became agitated. She asked the reason for such behavior. Had something really happened between the two of them? The answer was negative. The interlocutor put her hand to her forehead with a martyred look. In any case, she decided that she needed to ask her friend something, but she remained silent. The blonde expressed her surprise and impatience. This was not like Gaeun. She had never stalled for time before. The brunette began to stutter. She wanted to know how to flirt. Flirt? She couldn't pronounce the right word. Sylgia tried to clarify the question. Gaeun blushed to the roots of her hair. She quickly said her question. She was interested in how her friend flirted with someone. The blonde couldn't contain her surprise. Her question sounded quite loud and unexpected. It was hard to believe in such a turn of events. The corridor of the school was noisy. Students were hurrying about their business. Gaeun was standing next to one of the classrooms. The girl seemed to be rehearsing a role. She grabbed her ears. Smiling, she asked if classes were over. She addressed him as dear. The next phrase was that she had been waiting for her darling. The student covered her face with her hand in despair. I remembered the morning conversation. I asked the guest what he wanted. The guy wanted her to wait until his lesson was over. She had to call him honey in a flirtatious voice and then hug him. She agreed. The girl had no other choice. The brunette was ready for it. Gaeun had been standing outside the office for some time. Her patience was running out. In her mind, she was calling for her friend to come out already. The student was walking down the steps. He wasn't looking around. He was absorbed in his smartphone. Suddenly, he looked up. He noticed Gaeun and approached the girl. He asked if she was waiting for Chirim. The girl shuddered in surprise. She nodded to the guy who approached. She answered positively. The young people stood opposite each other. They couldn't find a topic for conversation. An awkward silence hung between them. Gaeun waved her hand in front of her face. She asked the guy if he agreed that it was a bit hot. It felt like summer again. The interlocutor answered that she could speak. The guy did not finish his thought. The girl froze in surprise. A question was read in her eyes. The end of the phrase sounded unambiguous. The guy looked at his interlocutor. He recommended that she behave with him casually. Gaeun smiled at this answer. She suggested the guy not to be shy, and to do the same. The student continued to look at his phone. He said that everything was fine anyway. The brunette felt awkward. She agreed with his choice. He could do as he felt comfortable. The young people continued to be close. The girl was secretly looking at the guy. He continued to stare at his phone. He didn't pay attention to the girl standing next to him. Gaeun mentally estimated the student's height. If you think about it, he's so tall. Although the girl didn't consider herself short. The interlocutor expressed the opinion that it was high time for Shirkarim to leave the auditorium. The girl nodded her head in agreement. She turned to the guy with a question. Why was he here? Didn't he really need to go anywhere? Maybe he was waiting for Sharim too. The guy tore his gaze away from his phone. He looked at the girl with surprise. Then he answered that they had group classes today. He asked if that was not the reason she was waiting here too. The young people froze, looking at each other. Gaeun admitted that it had completely slipped her mind. The interlocutor was surprised that this was really the group leader. The girl grabbed her head with her hands. This was the last thing she should forget. What came over her, she asked herself. The guy sympathized with her. It happens. Tareem appeared in the corridor. A happy smile spread across his face. He waved his hand at her and called her by name. He came closer. He asked if the girl was here to make amends to him. The student agreed with this statement. Smiling even wider, the guy spread his arms out to the side. He invited her to begin. Tareem was ready. The girl felt awkward. Tareem's friend was standing nearby and watching all this from the side. Tareem hurried her friend. He insisted. He waited. Yeom Ji-hoon decided that he had better leave. The girl began to say that the thing was that the brunette's face turned red. She covered her mouth with her hand. Incomprehensible sounds came out of her lips. The girl felt awkward. The guy was watching her. He noticed the student's face. She was about to faint. Gayun apologized to her friend. The girl asked if she could make amends in some other way. The guy smiled. He didn't mind. The stunned student's mouth dropped open in surprise. She couldn't believe it. It was so simple. The friend came closer. He admitted that all he wanted was to see how nervous the girl would be. Gayun looked at her interlocutor. He suggested simply holding his hand. The young man would consider them even. Their fingers intertwined. The girl was shocked by what happened. She looked at their intertwined hand. She noticed a bandage on her friend's fingers. She asked when he managed to get hurt. Tareem replied that he had burned himself this morning. He was making scrambled eggs. The girl gasped with concern. The young man looked into his companion's eyes. His smile was gentle and sincere. He assured his girlfriend that it was nothing. Tareem pulled the girl along with him. He reminded her that it was time to hurry up because they were late. At that moment, Nara came out of the classroom. She watched the couple walk away. She noticed how Tareem was holding his companion's hand. The girl didn't like this. She thought about it and folded her arms in front of her. Different thoughts wandered through her head. The empty auditorium quickly filled with the children's ringing voices. Someone asked if they were ready. Rock, paper, scissors! They stood in a circle. Several pairs of hands threw out their palms. Someone ordered an Americano. Someone asked for a strawberry smoothie. 3 stood a little apart from everyone else. These were the ones who clenched their fists during the drawing. The boys were 3 again. No one was surprised anymore. Gayun wondered why her friend had clenched his fist too, but he would tell her to forget about it. They had to go. Tareem asked if she wanted whipped cream on top. She nodded. The guys came out from behind the audience. The rest of their group remained at the table. Gayun sat with her laptop open. She wanted to get some comments on the script. Suddenly, Nara spoke up. She suggested that they start voting for a new team leader. Gayun tensed up at the suggestion, and the girl continued. She noted that Gayun was doing everything she could. She was not only the group's leader, she also wrote the script, and then she accused the brunette of being greedy. Seul-gia noticed that they read everyone's script, voted for the one they thought was the best, and everyone insisted on Gayun becoming the leader of the group. The blonde didn't understand why the girl was raising the issue again, to which the schemer suggested voting again, this time for the last ball. She slapped her palm on the table. Shin Nara had an unpleasant grin on her face. The girl suggested that everyone write down their average grade for the previous semester. Gayun said, 4.5. Gayun, the interlocutor, asked what she meant. It turned out that the brunette's average score was 4.5. Seul-gia laughed. She admitted that Gayun got an A+ last semester. The boys were stunned by this news. There was no one among them with a higher average grade. The girl was called a cold-blooded learning machine. They all voted for this best script. There was no point in voting again. Nara was not happy with this development. Without looking at the girl, Gayun said that she could vote for another leader of the group if she wanted. In any case, the brunette did not object. Nara decided to make a scene. She made a claim about why her interlocutor suddenly spoke to her so informally. Gayun retorted, after all, the girl did not ask permission to speak to her casually. Besides, this was not the place for a troublemaker to vent her personal frustrations, and she was asked to try to restrain herself. The indignant Nara turned into an enraged fury. She jumped up and rushed at her interlocutor. She angrily screamed that this was what Gayun had just said. At this time, the guys returned to the auditorium with drinks. The sudden movement of the chair knocked the treat he had brought out of the guy's hands. All the cups with hot and cold drinks flew towards Gayun. The girl's snow-white trousers were hopelessly ruined. The huge brown stain was growing in size. Everyone froze in surprise. From all sides, people began to call out to the girl. They were wondering if Gaeun was okay. They were asking how she was. Nara froze from what was happening. Seoljia mentioned God. She was very worried about her friend. Cherim's friend explained that the drink was very hot. Gaeun was extremely hurt. She felt so disappointed. Bitter tears rolled down her face. Cherim stood in the doorway of the auditorium. He didn't take a single step. His eyes were frozen in surprise and a question about what had happened. Everyone in the room started to stir. The students rushed to the victim. The girl was bravely going through this situation. The young man sat down next to the victim's chair. He asked if his friend had burned herself. Gaeun answered in the negative. She said she was fine. Tears continued to flow from her eyes. The student closed her eyes. She admitted that she needed to visit the restroom. The girl tried to get up. Seoljia grabbed her hand. She was perplexed. She asked how it was possible for her friend to be okay. In anger, she turned to Nara. She accused the schemer of doing everything on purpose. She wanted to kick Gaeun out from the very beginning. She demanded a new leader for the group and all that. Nara was confused. Stuttering, she began to justify herself and deny everything. She looked at her friends with huge eyes. The blonde flared up, demanded that Nara apologize, and did it right away. The students stood silently, watched. Cherim approached his friend. He looked her in the eyes. He asked if Nara really did it. The girl narrowed her eyes. Did the student really want to accuse her of doing it on purpose? The young man asked her to explain the situation. Nora was confused by this statement. She wondered if Cherim, as her friend, shouldn't believe what she was saying. The girl was confused. The guys started discussing what had happened. Different opinions were heard. They said that Nara was causing them all trouble. Everyone turned their attention back to the victim. She stood up from her chair. An ugly brown stain spread across Gaeun's snow-white trousers. Nara lowered her head. The girl agreed that she needed to apologize first. She offered to do everything right. And she apologized. Suddenly, the troublemaker burst out laughing. She touched her hair. She said that she hadn't done it on purpose. The girl continued to reason. It shouldn't have been like this at all. Of course, she could have done it. If they want to, let them believe it. If they don't, let them. But it was just an accident. The students were taken aback by this statement. Did she really call it an apology? Someone had made an unflattering comment about the schemer. It was not supposed to be like this at all. Cherim looked at his old friend with hostility. Did she really call this whole farce an apology? Okay. Suddenly, Gaeun intervened in the conversation. She said that everything was fine. It was an accident. The troublemaker was stunned by such a statement from the girl who suffered from her actions. She asked again incredulously, was everything really okay? She hadn't misheard. She checked. Had Gaeun really just said that everything was okay? The brunette confirmed. Even though Nara wanted to get her, the victim recalled that everything happened in front of everyone. The schemer had no time to plan anything. Nara froze in place in surprise. Yeom Ji-hoon appeared. He was holding a bag of ice. He handed it to Gaeun. He said that he asked for some at the coffee shop. The girl was touched by such concern. She became embarrassed and thanked the guy. Cherim approached them. He offered to take his friend to the medical center. The girl refused. She said that she was fine. The guy was unhappy with this statement. He insisted on his own. It didn't suit him. Gaeun was perplexed. Why did her friend behave like that? Why did he force her to visit the medical center? The girl made a decision. She headed towards the blonde. She voiced her position. She would go with Seoljia. The friend took Gaeun's arm. Together, they headed towards the door. They left the classroom. Cherim watched them. He thought the coffee must have been very hot. The girls left the room. The guy turned to the troublemaker. He called her by name. The girlfriend froze. She suspected that further conversation could be unpleasant for her. The guy's words echoed loudly throughout the audience. Cherim said that he needed to talk to the girl. The medical wing was deserted. The blonde and brunette came out of the medical center. They said a warm goodbye to the office employee. Seoljia looked at her friend. She asked if they couldn't just kick Nara out of the project. The brunette asked why they would do that. It was just an accident. The blonde was very worried about her friend. The nurse said that the girl might have a scar from the burn. Gain calmed the girl down. She insisted that she had to go to class. It was time for her to go. Her friend asked if the brunette could handle it herself. She received an affirmative answer. In the hallway, the girl said goodbye. Gayun thanked her friend for her help. She said she would call later. They agreed to meet. As soon as the blonde disappeared from sight, the victim quickly headed back to the medical center. She had a request for the nurse. After some time, the girl texted Charim's friend. She was looking for the guy. Shin Nayeon replied that he should be in the club room on the 3rd floor. Reported that he seemed very angry. The girl quickly typed a reply message on her smartphone. She thanked the young man for the information. The student had a pack of adhesive bandages in her palm. The thought occurred to her that she had overdone it, but the girl remembered their intertwined fingers. She remembered the bandages on the boy's fingers. She decided that she was not overdoing it. After all, her friend had suffered because of her. Gayun went to the door. She decided to just give it to him quickly. Voices were heard from behind the door. The girl hid. Her hand froze on the door handle. Nora was outraged. She was screaming. Why the hell would she deliberately spill hot coffee? Gayun froze. She listened. The troublemaker continued her excuses. She admitted that Charim had every reason to be angry. The young men stood opposite each other. The girl folded her arms across her chest. Nara insisted that she was his girlfriend. The guy didn't refuse it. He explained that it was because of this that he started talking about this topic. He is her friend. He knows her. Charim accused the girl of pretending. In fact, she was plotting to get even with Gayun. He understood this perfectly well. Nara was outraged by such words. She laughed in the guy's face. Let him look at himself. Treating her like shit when all he did was be nice to Gayun. Did she know what a two-faced bastard he was? The brunette froze in front of the auditorium entrance. She was pondering what she had heard. If you think about it, I remembered Charim. His face, his smile. He always smiled when he was around. The young man flared up. Anger blazed in his eyes. He strongly advised his interlocutor not to change the subject. He asked why his friend went to such extremes to quarrel with Gayun. Anger showed on the girl's face. She shouted that it was all because... The brunette watched what was happening in the auditorium through the half-open door. She could hear Nara's attempts to justify herself and explain her behavior. Gayun pulled back from the door. She wondered why she was standing there and eavesdropping. The girl turned her back to the audience. Her feet took a few steps away. She decided that she had to leave. But the following words reached her ears. This made the girl stop. The guy reminded Shin Nara, in case she forgot Gayun, and he were a fake couple. They weren't really in love with each other. For some reason, these words hurt the girl. And the friend continued to express his arguments to Nara. His relationship with the brunette will end when one of them decides to end it. Gayun heard the confession that she was doing Charim a favor. The friend asked Naru to remember this fact. The girl couldn't stand it any longer and headed away from the audience. She walked along the deserted corridors of the educational institution. Various thoughts swarmed in her head. The courtyard of the school was crowded. Students were preparing for a new school day. Gayun was in a bad mood. Her head was down. She was walking on autopilot. Her thoughts were haunting her. She didn't notice anything around her. I remembered Charim's words. They are a fake couple. They are not really in love with each other. Their relationship will end when one of them decides to end it. The student clenched her fist. She was surprised by her strange behavior. She couldn't forget yesterday. In fact, Charim hadn't said anything bad. So why did she keep thinking about his words? The girl moved forward by inertia. Another question sounded in her head. Was this something unexpected for her? The girl was distracted from her sad thoughts by the sound of her phone. She stopped and took the device out of her purse. A message from a friend appeared on the screen. Charim asked if his girlfriend was at the university. Then the questions started pouring in. He asked how her leg was. He said that he had called yesterday, but the girl had not answered. He asked if the girl was busy. Gayun was fed up with the annoying sounds of endless incoming calls. She tapped the screen of her smartphone several times, wrote a reply, turned off the device. The girl went on. Mentally, she gave herself advice. She needed to pull herself together. She just needed to pull herself together. Charim was sitting on the bed. The smartphone was lying next to him. The guy was puzzled why the girl didn't answer him. The signal of an incoming message tore him out of his thoughts. He picked up the phone. He looked at the screen. I read the message I received. I even exhaled in surprise. It was unexpected. The answer was short and laconic. Gayun wrote that she was busy. The guy was stunned. Was that really all his friend could tell him? There were a lot of people in the library. Students were sitting at tables. Everyone was doing their own thing. Gayun was among those students. She was sitting at her open laptop. She was focused. The quiet clicks of the keyboard could be heard. A strange rustling noise broke her concentration. She looked up from her work and turned her head towards the sound. Shireen's best friend was sitting next to the girl. The student was surprised by such an unexpected neighbor. The guy made an indefinite sound. Silence was required in the library. So the young man greeted his acquaintance with a nod. She waved back. The guys were sitting next to each other. The girl continued typing something on her laptop. The guy was looking thoughtfully into the distance. Some time passed. The students began to disperse. The library hall gradually emptied. Only the young people were sitting next to each other at one of the tables. They continued to study. None of them paid attention to the time. The young man glanced down. He noticed a dropped pen on the floor next to Gayun's chair. He moved his chair back. He picked up his pen. Silently, he placed it on the table next to the girl's hand. Gayun continued working. She quickly tapped her fingers on the keyboard of her laptop. She didn't even move. The guy was silent too. He was reading. The rustling of the pages of his book being turned could be heard. A sigh of relief came from the girl. The work was done. She was holding a flash drive in her hands. The student stretched with pleasure. Everything was ready. The girl smiled with satisfaction. The guy turned and addressed his neighbor. He asked if the girl was leaving. He received an affirmative answer. He made a request. Could she stay a little longer? The girl was surprised. She asked why he needed it. The young man explained. His friends would be here any minute. And Shireen, too. Gayun asked if that was true. The girl jumped up from her seat very quickly. The laptop was hastily stuffed into her purse. The guy watched her actions in confusion. Gayun quickly got ready. She waved to the puzzled guy. She said that she would go then. Yeon Ji-hoon gasped in surprise. Then he thought about it. He decided that the girl was probably in a hurry. The young man noticed a small object on the table next to his elbow. In her haste, Gayun had left her flash drive behind. The student was in a hurry. She ran out of the library building. She had to leave before Shireen got there. She didn't have time. Two friends were walking in her direction. One of them admitted that he felt sick every time he was near a place full of books. Gayun quickly turned around. She made a lightning-fast decision. An idea arose to hide around the corner of the library building. She heard a call to Shireen. Was he listening to his friend? The young man stopped. He looked thoughtfully at the screen of his smartphone. Shin Na-yeon asked what his friend intended to do. Shireen was typing a message. The blonde chuckled. He was watching his friend's actions. He was writing a message to Gayun again. Na-yeon was surprised by her friend's actions. He didn't understand why he was sending another message. He needed to stop this. The girl had said she was busy, so he needed to leave her alone. Stop obsessing. Shireen waved away his friend's advice. He threw his hand off his shoulder. He answered with displeasure that he intended to do whatever he wanted. The girl listened to the friend's argument from around the corner. Na-yeon asked her friend not to act like a stalker. In response, he received a remark. Look who's talking. Gayun tried to hide. She began to sneak away from her friends. She walked along the corridor. The blonde screamed triumphantly. He noticed the girl's silhouette in the large windows of the building. Shireen immediately asked what had happened. The girl tried not to attract attention, but the young man's voice caught up with her. He called the student by name. Na-yeon asked where she was sneaking off to. If he didn't know her, he would have thought that the student was trying to avoid meeting Shireen. His friend was standing next to him. He was looking at the girl intently. The brunette blushed slightly. She felt awkward. She started making excuses. She claimed that everything was completely wrong. Cherm interrupted her arguments. The young man insisted that they needed to talk. Young people were standing on the street. The guy was trying to figure out why he couldn't get through to his girlfriend. And when he did, her answers were very sparse. The leaves rustled on the trees around the couple. The guy wondered what was going on. The girl lowered her head and gasped in response. She had to answer something. Gayun looked up at the young man. The light hit her eyes. She squinted. The guy came closer. He shielded her from the interfering sunbeam with his palm. It was cute. The girl was embarrassed. She apologized. She said she was busy with her studies. The guy leaned towards Gayun. He asked if her leg was okay. She confirmed it. The young man was pleased to hear that. He knew she was busy, but he asked her to write to him from time to time. He was worried. This answer caught the brunette off guard. She was surprised. Could he really be worried? The guy's words about their fake couple came back to mind. About how they weren't in love with each other. The next thing that came to mind was Seulji's statement. Even she might change her mind. If someone with that face whispered sweet nothings into her ear. The friend was sitting opposite Gaeun and smiling. In her opinion, it was all a pretense. The young people were still in the library courtyard. A group of guys noticed Cherim. They came up to him. They asked if he was dating someone. The friend gasped. The girl stood silently nearby. The young man put his hand on Gayun's shoulder. He answered their question affirmatively. He confessed to the students that they loved each other. The girl was surprised by her friend's behavior. The guys started making fun of Cherim. They laughed that it was getting hot there. One of the students admitted that he turned green with envy. They advised him to get himself a girlfriend. The company went their own way. Ga-seun slapped her friend's hand. She removed his hand from her shoulder. The young people stood opposite each other. They did not look away. Each was thinking about his own. Cherim addressed the girl by name. Gayun looked at her interlocutor. Sadness froze in the girl's eyes. The guy asked what had happened. He did not understand his friend's behavior. The interlocutor drew the young man's attention to the fact that the guys had left. She clarified that they only had to pretend in front of other people. The friend saw nothing wrong with putting his arm around her shoulders. The girl objected. She didn't know how the guy felt about this, but the brunette made it clear that she found it unpleasant. Gayun got angry. All his talk about love and sudden touches, she began to feel like the guy was crossing the line. Looking into her friend's eyes, she made demands. When they are alone, the girl would like Cherim to respect her personal space. The young man was surprised. Personal space. He asked if the girl meant that she wanted him to keep his distance. She answered with a definite yes. The guy thought about it. So that's what their relationship was like. In reality, they were nothing more than strangers. The pause dragged on. The tension grew. None of the boys could utter a word. The young men stood next to each other. They did not look at each other. Cherim was the first to perk up. He agreed with the girl's arguments. He turned around abruptly. He left. Gayun's lonely figure stood out against the backdrop of the billboards. The wind ruffled her hair. She watched the boy walk further and further away. She felt uncomfortable. The hand slid along her hand. The girl clenched her teeth. She tried to understand whether it was really so uncomfortable. I remembered someone else's hand on my shoulder, and Cherim's words when he told the guys he knew that they loved each other. She remembered how the students who approached them laughed kindly. Her heart was beating wildly. Gayun tried to figure herself out. She realized that she was nervous because while it was just an act for the guy, her feelings could become real. Educational institution. The class ended. Some students were leaving the classroom. Someone said that they would see each other at the next lesson. Gayun was sitting at her desk, lost in thought. Decided to wipe her glasses. Silgaya was sitting next to the girl. She asked if something had happened. The brunette asked again what her friend meant. She explained that she had noticed a certain habit in the student. It turned out that whenever Gon was stressed, she would use shorthand for her notes, saying that she needed to focus or something like that. The girl wondered if she really did that. The friend insisted. It was obvious that Gaeun had withdrawn into herself, and that was not like her at all. Suljia demanded an admission of what was going on. The brunette waved it off, said it was nonsense. The phone rang. The blonde saw who her friend had received the message from and was surprised. Yom Ji-hoon. Why would Cherim's friend write to Gayun? It was unclear. The message said that the girl had forgotten her flash drive. Gayun read these words with surprise. She got scared. She nervously reached into her bag. She started looking for something there. Suljia asked if there was something wrong with her friend. The brunette only sighed bitterly. Her hand reached to her face. The girl stood up abruptly. She told her friend that nothing special had happened. She explained that it was time for her to go. She hurried to the exit. Gayun was already leaving the classroom doors when her friend called out to her. The girl was in a hurry. The blonde was sitting at her desk. She remained in the dark. And why was her friend always so busy? Gayun was waiting in the hallway. She was holding her smartphone in her hands. She was reading messages from a friend. Jihoon explained that he would wait for her in the club room on the 3rd floor. She didn't like it. After all, the girl really wanted to avoid visiting the film department building. The student stood in front of the classroom door. There were leaflets hanging on the wall next to the right door. Something was preventing the girl from entering. She really hoped that Shirima would not be in this room. With a quiet rustle, one leaf fell from its place and fell on the floor at Gayun's feet. The girl sat down. The leaflet was spreading across the tile like a bright spot. She decided to pick it up from the floor. She took it in her hand. Suddenly, the office door opened. The girl jumped up in fright. Her eyes widened in surprise. The student lost her balance. She buried her face in the man's chest. It was Jihoon who suddenly came out of the classroom. The young people collided. A lock of the girl's hair caught on the young man's jacket zipper and got stuck. An awkward situation ensued. The guys froze. Both couldn't utter a word. They just moaned. The guy made up his mind. He asked the girl if she wanted him to get them. Gayun agreed. She couldn't move her head. There were vague sounds in the corridor. Ohs. Ahi. The guy asked to be patient a little longer. The young men entered the auditorium. Jihoon continued to free a strand of the girl's hair that was caught in the zipper of his jacket. Their bodies were very close to each other. Gayun began to apologize for causing her friend inconvenience. She tried to move away from the guy a little. He assured her that everything was fine and asked her to stop backing away. The young man could not free his hair from the trap. The girl agreed, but she couldn't stop fidgeting. She couldn't stay in one place, but she tried. Gayun watched the boy's actions carefully. She thought that Jihoon would just pull out her hair, but he was very careful. The young people were standing quite close to each other. Finally, he managed to pull a lock of hair out of the grip. At that moment, a group of familiar guys entered the auditorium. They fell silent, stared at the couple. Shin Nayeon rudely asked what Jihoon was doing here. Charim was also surprised by what he saw. Everyone froze in surprise. Gayun and the brunette turned around at their exclamations. They didn't know what to say in response. An awkward silence hung in the air. The girl blushed. She turned around and tried to move away from the young man. Charim tensed up. He asked his friend what she was doing in this office. The next question was addressed to a friend. Charim asked why he hadn't picked up the phone. The girl looked up in surprise. She remained silent. There were students standing at the door. The guys were trying to figure out who this girl was. They were wondering if this was Jihoon's girlfriend. There were excited exclamations. Nayeon flared up. He couldn't understand what they were all talking about. Tried to clarify. Explained that Gayun is Charim's girlfriend. Called everyone idiots. Surprised discussions were heard. And the question, why is that? Charim looked at the couple. He confirmed that this was his girl. He smiled. But the smile was insincere. Everyone froze. The atmosphere grew tense. Everyone was thinking about something of their own and making assumptions. A chill blew through the auditorium. The girl made a decision. She decided that it would be better if she left. Jihoon handed her the flash drive, reminded her not to forget to take it. Their eyes met. While the little black thing was being passed from hand to hand, Charim watched them, silent. Gayun thanked Jihoon. The girl passed by her friend. Looking after her, Charim wished his friend a good weekend. He turned to his friend. He said that they needed to go. Jihoon remained motionless. He stared at one point. Gayun quickly left the auditorium. She ran past the guys. They froze at the door. Charim watched the girl leave the auditorium with an incomprehensible expression on his face. No one said a word.